Okay, so this keyword basically always holds current class reference. Let's say I define x here of type string, and then in the test method, I'm trying to print the x without any keyword. This keyword, I'm just printing x as is, but basically it will try to get this value, which is defined outside of this class. Okay, because if you are referring any value or any method inside a class, you have to always use this keyword. Okay, so the same example with this keyword I have here. Okay, so now here I didn't change anything, I just added this dot. Okay, now it will print the hello here, but in this case it will print 10. 10 is defined and assigned outside of this class. Okay, so this is one of the important keyword in TypeScript. When we are working on Angular application, we have to use this keyword a lot. Okay.
Okay. So is the field and property same thing?
Yes, field and property both are same, and we can use we can interchange that word to define a field.
Okay.
And we covered access specifiers also, right? Like public and private,
Protected.
protected. Yeah. So now these access specifiers are applicable for both fields and methods. Okay. Here I tried explaining with the fields. This is a private, this is a protected, public, and I didn't mention anything here. So by default, it will consider it as a public. Okay, and this is a method. I didn't mention any access specifier here before, but I just tried to access all these fields inside this method by using this keyword. So from this point onwards, you'll be seeing this keyword a lot, because whenever you're trying to access anything inside of this class from here to here, it must be with this keyword. So all these are valid in this case. So all are valid. This access specifiers will be basically to control a visibility of a field or visibility of a method. Okay, so here if you see, I have two classes. Okay, I have car class, and then I have a brand RD class. Okay, so now I have here color of car, number of doors, and engine CC. These three are my fields, and I just selected three because I just want to explain these three types, right? So in this method save data, I can access all these fields because we are in same class, under same class, right? From here to here. So this is a public method. By default, we didn't define any access specifier here, so it will be considered as public. And here I mentioned explicitly as private. So this method is test method underscore one is a private class. The same way, I have another class which is a public. So these two are same actually. If I didn't define anything, it will be considered public. If I define explicitly also, it will be considered public. So both are valid for public. But in case of private and protected, you have to define explicitly. Okay. Now if I come little down, and in RD class, I have price and model year, these two fields. Now I am trying to access price, model year within RD class. These fields are of RD class, right? So these are perfectly valid. But here, now I try to access, create an object of class. Okay. So always remember, this is called a class. Like if you define a class and class name and open brace and end brace and then whatever fields, methods, this is called a class. But once you create a object, you create a basically reference of that class, then this is called object. Okay, this is class, but this is called object. Left side variable is called object. Okay, so that's how in object oriented programming, this is how the terminology is. So if you create a class with an instantiate class with a new keyword, then that variable is called object or object reference. Okay. Now I am trying to access color of car object and number of doors of car object, engine CC of car object. So red color is okay, color is accessible because color is public here. Okay. And number of doors and engine CC both are not accessible because they are one is protected and other one is private. Okay. Now I try to access methods now, methods of car object. So I can access test method 1, but it says error because test method 1 is a private method, right? And I try to access test method 2. I'm able to access because it's a public method. Okay. But all this is good. It is clear, public and private. It is clear that private is accessible only within the class. Public is accessible within the class and outside the class also, like in other classes also. But where this private is useful, okay, this third one explains that. So in case of protected you can access inside a class without any issues. Okay, but to access protected outside the class, basically that class must extend the car object. Excuse me. Okay, so this extending means this is called inheritance. In object oriented programming, this is called inheritance. It's like having a parent and having a child, and child will inherit all the properties and the methods, right? All the properties and methods of parent class into the child class. Here in this case, the RD class. Okay, that means let's say if I define public color here, this property is available inside it once I use this extend car. Okay, in the same way, protected also now available inside this class. Okay, here, and I cannot access private as we saw in the previous example. This cannot be accessed outside of this. Only within the class private will be accessible. Otherwise, it is not accessible. Even the methods also, you cannot access private outside. Like even the child class also, you cannot access private. Public you can access, protected you can access. Okay. So now if I go here, RD class starts here from here, right? Now go down. I have only two fields in RD class, price and model year. These two. But now I'm able to access color directly without any issue, and number of doors without any issue. When I try to access engine CC, I'm getting this error because engine CC is a private field. Okay. The same way, same thing applies to methods also. I cannot access private fields. I can access protected. I can access public. Okay. Now you understand the difference between public, private, and protected, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now another important thing is this access modifiers or access specifiers, right? Private, public, and protected. This can be applied to constructor variables also. Like inside constructor, we saw earlier only this example, right? We defined only type. But now we are going to see we can define the access specifier inside the constructor variables also. So you can ask one question, like if it is if you are passing this fields to the constructor, this is starting here and ending here, then what is the scope of these two variables, so that we have to define public and private, right? So once this constructor is called, whenever we create an object, this will be end, right? Basically this method is executed and these two fields will be instantiated, and then we are done. The use of this the scope of these two variables will be gone by end of this execution, right? So if you ask me that question, basically in TypeScript or JavaScript, one weird thing is if you pass any constructor variables, basically these two objects will be attached here. Just like X and Y, there will be A and there will be B. And whatever scope we defined here, public or private, will be coming here. Public and private. And type is number. Basically, these two fields become the fields in the class. So that means, let's say, you can ask one more question. If you're saying that A and B are attached to this class, then can I access inside of any method? Let's say, let me remove this and let me add it somewhere here. Now let me add one method. Okay. Test method. Can I access this variable A? This dot A. This dot B. Yes. Both are valid. Okay. So that is the reason we are using this access specifiers in the constructor. Okay. So it's not like you have to define variables only here. You can define variables in constructor also, and those variables will be available across the class from here to here. And this concept will be useful in Angular. Okay. It's not this complicated. It will be easy. I'll remind when we come across this use case in Angular.
So I have a question in that program.
Yeah, sure.
So so we defined X as private and Y as private, and defining A as public. So it's the same value, right? Like X and Y will be the A value will be assigned to X and X, right? So here it is, A is defined as public, so that X can be used outside that as a public, or it will be still private, because
No,
X is defined as
X is always private and Y is always private. But I defined A
so
as
that
public.
A
right?
can be accessed outside.
Yes, A
as
can
a
be accessed
public?
outside. Yes.
Okay.
But B cannot be accessed.
So, but yeah.
So just like defining these two variables here below X and Y.
So the use of this is like, so making the private means it will be only accessed inside that class, right? So if
Yes.
in the constructor, if I make it A, is it like, I want to use that A outside the class, right?
Yes, but in
So
normal
whatever
scenario, we will not be using anything outside of this class, which is defined in the constructor, because this will be used to basically the constructor variables will be used in Angular to inject any services. Let's say you
Okay.
have a backend API, and that backend
Okay.
API returns student data. So here what we can do is we can create a student service somewhere outside here. Let's assume that here, okay, somewhere here, and then
Okay.
you can inject that service in constructor here. You can always keep it as private. In normal scenario, we keep it as a private. Then we say service student service, right? let me say SS, and of type
String.
student service. So this SS you can use across this class, like SS dot get student data with rule number X.
Okay.
I'll get this data. So this get student data is defined in this class, whatever class the service class, right?
Yeah.
SS class is here, and here you have get student data, which takes X as a parameter and sends request to server and returns data back to return type will be some object, student object.
Okay.
Okay, this object will be coming here, and you can do whatever you want inside this class with the data based on your business
Okay.
logic. Okay, so only those
Okay.
scenarios this constructor injection will be useful in Angular case.
Okay.
In other framework, I don't know, like there might be some different use also.
Okay.
And there is one more concept called interface. Interface is nothing but you just define a structure of a class, or like assume that a blueprint of class, and which can be to use this blueprint. Basically, you have to assign values just like this. Let's say I defined a structure here. Okay, student structure. So student structure means student will have a first name, last name, roll number, and some method to print student data, right? So assume that this is a structure you are enforcing. So wherever you're going to use the student later, so basically you're enforcing a structure. So the structure is first name, last name, roll number, and show details. These must be inside the implementation of the student class, wherever you are going to use it, like in later stages. So basically, I just try to use the student type of interface here. So as we discussed yesterday, we can define variables with where or let or constant, right? So I just use where here, and I defined a reference of type student class, right? And now inside it, I'm trying to define initialize first name with Tom, last name with Hanks, and rule number with some number. And I'm initializing a method also. Like I wrote a logic of this class. Here, if you see, there is no logic. This is the empty definition. But here I have an implementation, right? So when like later here, let's assume you're writing some code here, and you want to access student first name here. So what you can do, you can take this reference student dot in editors like Visual Studio. When you just type reference and then dot, because the Typescript already knows the structure, it will show this fields as suggestions like first name.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can basically write some logic here based on whatever business logic we have, and you can call this method just by saying the student dot show details. That's it. This value will be printed. Okay. The interfaces are just to enforce a structure normally. But in Java, in other programming languages also, this is the same case. Like interface is to enforce the structure and method signatures. But in TypeScript, we have a different use. Just like, let's say you have a student data and you not student, you can take any other examples also, like department, student, or teacher or college. Like all these objects, you can define a structure here, and the same structure you can use across the application. Assume that it's another type of class. Okay, so class also same, right? Class also you can basically enforce all these fields, and you can use those fields. But in classes, you'll have logic here. You have implementation of methods. You can assign values. So all these things can be done in classes. But in interfaces, you can just enforce the structure, but you cannot initialize these functions, or you maybe initialize the values, but you cannot write functions. Okay, so now the modules are like very important thing, because yesterday we saw in Angular application there is export and import keywords a lot, right? So for each component and each thing we see in Angular. So the basically a module is it's like a, a group of things, it can be a variable just like this, or it can be a class like this, or it can be a function. Okay, you can export anything using this export keyword. Okay, if you just write export in front of a class or a variable, then that value will be exported. So you can ask me where it will be exported. So this is a kind of syntax just to tell the TypeScript so that this value or this value will be available out of the defined file. Let's say I defined this class in student.ts file. Okay, student.ts. Now I have another class or another file. Let me say test.cs. Okay, so I cannot directly use the student class in test.ts directly. So basically, if you write export, TypeScript will do the background magic so that this class student will be available inside this test.cs. And the same way, the student name field will be available in student.ts. So it's like, basically segregating your code properly using this syntax export. Okay. So now export is done. Let's say I use export here, but I want to use it in some other file. Okay. So for that, we have to use import syntax. Import student from dot student. The dot student is the class name. Okay. We actually this is a file actually. Okay. Student.ts, but in TypeScript we don't have to mention the extension part. If you mention just the name part, that's fine. So basically what we are doing in test.ts, test.ts, we're importing student from student.ts file. Okay. So the full example is here. Export class employee and the same constructor and method. And now I want to use this employee inside. If you see the file name is employee.ts, but here another file is employee-test.ts. So now I use the import syntax to import employee class from employee.ts. So I didn't mention the ts part here. Okay. So now because I used export here, this employee class is available outside of this file. Okay, in the context of TypeScript execution. So now I can use this employee reference here. So now what I can do, I can create a new reference or new object of employee, and I can use this object to call any method to access any variables if any are defined here. In this case, there are no variables, right? Only we have show details method here, and the show details I'm calling here. Okay, and then I'm printing the result here. Okay. Now we can basically execute this sample to see how it works. But just before that, to execute this export and import syntax, we have to add these two parameters to the TypeScript. We are telling it's a module. Okay, import and export are nothing but modules. Okay, in terms of TypeScript. But we say modules here, but we don't say anything in the code as module. We say import or export. That's it. Okay, but while executing it, we have to mention --- module, and there are different types of modules in what we can say specifications in TypeScript. So normally this common.js will be used. Okay, so let me execute this example. I already have this example. So now first, just like yesterday, this is a class. and it has a constructor, and it has a method. Okay, and assume that there is no export here. I removed export. I just saved it, and here also there is no export, right? So let me comment this for now and see. Okay, what I'm doing here, I'm just creating an employee object and sending two parameters because the constructor is accepting two values. Okay, and then I defined another variable. I'm calling show details with this employee object reference, and then this show details is returning some value. So it is returning first name comma last name. Basically, it is appending to first name and last name and returning. So here the result will be assigned here, and I'm just printing the result, right? So let me execute it directly without the export here and without the import here. Okay. I'm just running test.ts because in test.ts we're actually using the employee and doing some logic, right? So it is complaining cannot find name employee. This employee is not found anywhere. Okay, let me uncomment this. Okay, so now I am importing employee from this file, which is beside test.ts, meaning that they both are in the same folder. Okay, now let's see what will happen. It is saying some more error. So it is saying, okay, the file first to TypeScript code.ts is not a module. It is saying that whatever code inside this file is not a module. So how can we make it a module? Just by adding the export. Now it compiled or like transpiled without any errors. So now I can run it with node test.js. See, it printed employee details, Shailendra and Chauhan. This data is being passed from here. So we defined it. We defined a class here, and we make it a module by adding a export keyword. And then in another file, we imported it using the import syntax, and then we just use it like normally without any special code here. Just like we defined a object, and we try to call show details method of employee class. Okay. Any questions here? Clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to make it little more, comfortable, let me go to any module in the code. Let me take this. This is simple thing. Now, if you see the component and this on init, okay, these are basically classes or like interfaces defined somewhere in the Angular core module. Okay, Angular core is a module which is written by the Angular framework guys. Okay, who are developing the Angular framework. So inside that, these two are classes defined there or exported there. Okay, if you go into that code, you can see export and the interface on init. Okay, and that we are able to import here by using the import keyword. The same way component. Okay, component is an interface exported somewhere in the Angular library, and we are able to import it by using import syntax. Okay, now these two values are available inside this class navbar component. Okay, and we saw interfaces, right? So basically interface, we have to use implements keyword. I just use a simple example there, but normally whenever you use an interface, you have to implement it. But if there is a class, if on init is a class, then you have to use extends syntax. I'll show here. We already saw that extend syntax somewhere here. Yeah, here. Because the car is a class type, right? So if you are basically inheriting a class, then you have to use extends, always extends keyword. If you are using if you are basically inheriting from an interface, you have to use implements here. Okay, so for to make it more simpler for with this example, what we've seen, let's say if I want to use this student and implement the student interface, what I have to write? Class assume that ABC implements student, open brace, close brace. So now these 4 fields will be coming to now these 3 fields will be coming to here, because I'm in what is that? I'm inheriting student interface, right? So now this, we don't have any signature here. Sorry, we don't have any implementation here. This is just a signature. This is just saying, okay, show details in method and which returns string. So what we have to do here is we have to implement it. The same name, show details, which returns string, open brace, close brace, and write some logic here. Okay. So this is how it will be done. And here also we did almost same thing, but the syntax is different. Here also we implemented student interface. Okay, we just defined student and we implemented it, like we implemented logic for this and we initialized all these fields. So basically we kind of implemented it here, but without a implements keyword. Okay, here we defined a class and implemented a student, and same drama here. Whatever we did here, right? This is same. Okay, so when you see on init, so you'll see the same basically. On it is interface and you're implementing it, and on init has a method called ng on init which returns void. Okay, so when you are implementing an interface, you have to always implement the methods inside it, the method signature. So here we implemented it, but we didn't write any logic. Okay, you have to at least keep the open brace and close brace, just for the sake of avoiding compiler errors. Okay, if I remove this, what will happen? So it is complaining. Class navbar component incorrectly implements interface on init. Property ng on init is missing in type navbar component, but required in type on it. So basically, if you're implementing any interface, you have to implement all the methods defined in the interface. So otherwise, it will throw error. So at least you can keep open brace and close brace. If you don't have any need of implementing this method, just write the signature and then just write the open brace and close brace. That's it. Okay, now the error is gone.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, modules, any doubts? Like exporting, importing, it is straightforward. You just have to
Yeah.
use the export keyword here in the before the class or field, and you have to import it in the another file. Okay.
Yeah.
And all these things, right? This TSC, compilation, transpilation, you will not be doing anything inside Angular. Just I'm covering this just because if you have deeper idea, then it will be easy for you to understand what will happen in the background.
Mhm.
Okay. And there is one more concept in TypeScript, or like in JavaScript also, you might have seen defining object this way, right? Straightforward. X equals to open brace and close brace. This means this is an object, and you're assigning that object to X here. The same way you can define any more complex objects also. Like instead of writing a class and then defining all the fields, or like writing an interface and defining all the fields, you can just create object by using just let keyword and then open brace and close brace. In JavaScript, by default, if you open a brace and close a brace, this is an object. Okay, you can define any type of values inside it. So here string number. But the disadvantage of having this kind of ad hoc objects is you will not know unless you see this object, you will not know what kind of values it will hold. Like I have first name, last name, rule number. Let's say this is defined somewhere in somewhere different file. I'm trying to use that object. Just I imported here. Okay, if I write export here, it will be exported. And if I import it, import student from ABC file. Now, if I try to use the student dot, I don't know which kind of values it has unless I go and check that file. But if it is interface or class, right? If I just use dot operator, then I'll get the suggestions as first name, last name, roll number. But here I don't get any suggestions because the editor will not know what fields this object has, because this is a ad hoc object. It's not a defined object.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, that's it. Objects is very simple thing, but this kind of syntax we'll be seeing like regularly when we're working with Angular.
Mhm.
Okay. And any questions so far? We have left with only decorators. So these decorators are directly related to our Angular component and ng module services, right? So this is kind of different syntax. It will be used for various reasons. I'll cover that tomorrow deeply, but I can show this thing, like we have this component, right? So component is one such decorator.
Mhm.
Okay, if I remove this is just a very plain class, right? We have seen everything here. We saw this, and we have this seen the implementation, constructor, methods, everything, right? So we only left with this one. If we are if we cover this thing, then I think we are good. So any questions so far? Like if you want to
No.
cover any topic little deeper, I can do that. Or if you are good, I think I'll share this document again. Okay, I just added few more details.
Mhm.
You can practice this. Okay, from tomorrow Saturday, right? Tomorrow we'll have session, but Sunday let's take off. Sundays we'll not do any sessions. Okay, only Monday to Saturday we'll do. So today we'll start Angular. Okay, today we'll start this Decorators we can finish within like 15 to 20 minutes, not even 15 minutes, like 10 minutes we can finish. Only thing is we have to understand the syntax and why the decorators will be used. Okay. Once that is done, we can just go into Angular ones, and we can just brush up all the Angular syntaxes again, and then we straightforward go into components and directive services.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, if no questions, I think we can close the session. Or if you want me to cover any topics like the hands-on of anything here, I can do one more time.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Both are good, right?
Yeah.
Okay then. Chalo, thank you. I'll share this video recording, and I'll share the this PDF again with all the details. Okay. Then
Yeah,
you can
sure.
practice it. I'm stopping the screen share.